Okay, the second half of understanding I is that the I powers, if we look at this table right here, what I said in the first one is look, it repeats in powers of four here, right? So every time you get to the fourth power and you go to the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, nine, 10, 11, 12, right? All these values are the same here. So let's take a look at, for example, I to the fifth power. So if I divide 5 divided by 4 and I get a decimal answer of 0.25, right? So 0.25 is going to give us any one of these numbers in here, right? For example, if I look all the way down here and I say, well, what is I to the 33rd power? If I do 33 divided by 4, I'm going to get 0.25 as my decimal, right? So anything that you get 0.25 as a decimal, right, is going to turn into just an I. And if I look at, for example, this next column here, I'm going to get 0.5, here I'm going to get 0.75, and here I'm going to get 0.0, meaning it'll divide in equally. For example, let's try I to the 26th power. So if I do 26 divided by 4, I'm going to get 0.5 as a decimal, right? So what is that? Well, that is just -1. So anything with I to when you divide by 4, it leaves you with a decimal of 0.5, you're going to get a value of -1. And then, for example, let's look at this column right here. I to the third power is -I. Also, I to the 35th power is -I. So how do I check that? Well, if I do 35 divided by 4, look at the decimal. The decimal is 0.75. So anything I to the third power and beyond is going to be a -I. And then if I do something to the fourth power, for example, if I look I to the 40th. So if I do 40 divided by 4 and I don't get a decimal, meaning it's a 0.0, our answer is just going to be the number 1. Okay, so you can see, right, even if I try I to the 24th power, 24 divided by 4, you can see if I do that, that's just going to be the number 6, 6.0. So our answer will be 1. So if you want, I would make a chart of this in your notes. You don't have to have this entire chart here, okay? But just understand that if I get a decimal place of 0.25, you're going to get an I. If I get a decimal place of 0.5, you're going to get I squared, which is -1. If you get a decimal of 0.75, you're going to get -I. And if you don't get a decimal, right, or you get 0.0, you see that the answer is going to be 1, or it's going to simplify to the number 1. Okay, so you can see here what happens is in the coordinate plane, and what makes these numbers super, super unique here, I to the 0th power is 1. I to the first power is I squared is -1, I to the third is -I. So when you're graphing in the coordinate plane, or I'm sorry, in the imaginary plane, okay, this is what makes these sets of numbers unique. They just keep going around and around and around and around. Okay, so what do we mean by that? Let's take a look at a couple of these examples right here. I'm looking at I to the 14th power. Okay, so I to the 14th power. If I do 14, let me just clear this out here, 14 and I divide by 4, I'm going to get 3.5. All right, so that means this is the same as I squared, which is just -1. So you can use your chart for that if you need to. Right, I to the 53rd power. Okay, what exactly is that? Well, if I do 53 divided by 4, I'm going to get a remainder of 1, or 0.25. Okay, now 0.25 just means it's I to the first power. Okay, think of it as 1/4, 2/4, and 3/4. So I to the first power is really just the number I. Okay. So then if we're moving on here, I to the 120th power. Well, what is that going to be? That's large, large, large number way up there. So if I do 120 and I divide by 4, look, I get 30. Okay, so that means it's a decimal point of 0. So this is the same as I to the 0th power. right? Or I to the fourth power, which is just the number 1. So all this is just simplifying, okay? Now, we just reviewed a lot of our power rules here, and power rules also apply to I. So if I have this right here, I can just, since I'm multiplying powers, I can add the exponent. So 11 plus 13 plus 7 plus 9 gives me 40, right? So this is the same as I to the 40th power. Now, what is 40 divided by 4? You should be able to hopefully do that in your head, and we're going to get 10.0. So that means this is the same as I to the 0th power, which is just the number 1. Again, look back to your chart and reference your chart. Okay, this is a super, super important chart right here to kind of have for yourself to use. There are also a couple other tricks that feel free to ask us in class that we can help you out with that. Okay. Now, the last little bit is, again, what happens when we're adding all these imaginary numbers together? So this is similar to multiplying. So what we're going to do here, the best way to set this up is -6 times something plus 8 times something plus 2 times something plus 10 times something. All right, so we're going to figure out what each of those somethings are by using our calculator. So if I go 58 and I divide by 4, I'm going to get 0.5. Right? So this is the same as I squared because there's 2 quarters, right? I squared, which is just -1. And then I look at the next example. I do 108, 108, and I divide by 4, and then I get 27. So there's no decimal place, so this is I to the 0, right? Anything to the 0th power is 1, even if it is an I. And then I'm going to try 75 divided by 4, and I'm going to get 18.75. So there's 3 quarters here. So this is going to be I to the 3rd power, which is -I, according to your chart. And the last one is 89 divided by 4, and I'm going to get 22.25. So this is the same as I to the 1st power because there's 1 quarter. So we're just going to have an I. Okay? So that's step 1, right? Again, breaking these down step by step makes this much, much easier. So first thing, what is -6 times -1 is +6, plus 8 times 1 is 8, plus 2 times -I is -2I, and then the last one is 10 times I is plus 10I. So you can see here, we're going to combine like terms. 6 plus 8 is 14. And then -2I plus 10I gives us plus 8I. Okay, so broke it down step by step by step. Okay, use your charts, use your calculator. All right. Okay, on to the last one. Okay, very similar example, But the easiest thing to do is set it up first. Okay, so I'm going to write -5 times, I don't know what I to the 47th is, plus 10 times, I don't know what I to the 50 is, minus 8 times, I don't know what I to the 73 is, minus 3 times, I don't know what I to the 40th is. Okay, so let's figure out what each of those terms are. So 47 divided by 4 is 3 quarters left. So I would get I to the 3rd power, which is -I. And then jump over to 50. 50 divided by 4 is, there's 0.5, so that's 2 quarters. So I squared is -1. That's a super important one. You gotta really understand that I squared is -1. And then 73rd power, I don't know what that is. Let's 73 divided by 4, 0.25, that's 1 quarter. So I to the 1st power is just I. And the last one is 40. We just did that, but let's just show you again. 40 divided by 4 is 10.0. So I to the 0th power is 1. All right, so substitute those values in, and then let's just simplify. So -5 times -I is 5I. 10 times -1 is -10. -8 times +I is -8I. And then negative 3 times 1 is minus 3. And then here we are at combining like terms. So negative 10, and then negative 3 is negative 13. And then I've got 5i, and then I've got minus 8i, and we've got minus 3i. And then we are done. Okay? So it's important. Use your calculator. Okay? I use my calculator for this entire part right here. Okay? Use your calculator, and then make sure that we have this chart right here understood here. Okay? That each of these values are related. Okay? If you wanted to copy down the whole large chart, you can, but that's totally unnecessary because this is really what you need to know about the powers of I. Okay? Ask us questions. There are a couple other techniques on how to do this in class. All right?